So in the interest of time, our poor victims of conservation data services are our last group before lunch. So they are going to go ahead and take us right through to lunch. We will be running a little bit late. We're going to plot over lunch how to adjust our schedule. And so I'm going to go ahead and welcome Amy Greenwell up to the podium now to kick us off with conservation data services.
Thank you, Dave. The good news for all of you that are wanting the taco bar now is we're a very small team, so this will be quick. I'm going to introduce our team a little bit, and then we have two guest speakers. We have Julie Stolley. She's the director of the Upper Colorado River Endangered Fish Recovery Program, talking about some of the work we've done with them on the streamsystem.org database. And then we have Aaron Welch. He's the director of the Division of Conservation, to talk about his work with conservation easements and our partnership with CNHP and COMAP. There should be more slides.
There is. Why aren't they going? There you go.
Okay, great. So here's Conservation Data Services. We work with web and data development, database administration, database management, data distribution, and IT. So basically all things data for CNHP teams. Also for CSU, different units in the university, and of course many of the partners that are here today and beyond. My focus is on GIS and database management. Michael is data distribution and IT, and we're really pleased to introduce Yannick Ide. He's our new web and database developer. As you can see, Michael and I have been working here for quite a while, based on the old photos on this site compared to how we are today. So I just briefly wanted to talk about our biotics successes. A lot of you have heard about biotics today. It's our database where we track and map rare plants, animals, and plant associations in Colorado. And along with CPW and other partner data, it's one of the main data sets getting piped into the Codex website. So overall, we have over 45,000 mapped locations in our database. We have over 800 species of 800 different species and over 400 different plant communities. We track about 1,800, over 1,880 species. And what do we track? We track globally rare species, but we also track things that are globally common but rare in the state, whether that's just natural or if there's declines. We also track all the plant communities in the state, or all the known plant communities. And if you're familiar with the National Vegetation Classification System, their terminology for those are plant associations. And then we have over 1,900 potential conservation areas. And these are locations that support rare and imperiled species and plant communities and provide important habitat. 40 of them are B1, which means they have outstanding biodiversity. And if those were degraded or lost, we could have species go extinct. A good example of that is the Gunnison Basin, which supports Gunnison sage grouse and the entire known global population for Gunnison milkfudge. I did want to just mention that this year we had some outside expert review for our tracking list for mayflies, stoneflies, caddisflies, dragonflies, damselflies, moths, and butterflies. And we've also added bumblebees, some more bumblebees to our tracking list. Since we all met a couple years ago, we have mapped and updated over 9,000 mapped locations. And we also have about 114 models for Tier 1 and Tier 2 plant species. Most of these are on Codex right now. Some will be pushed through and updated for the next refresh this spring. And we also created some range maps for animals that have poor element occurrence distribution to make sure that potential habitat and known locations were piped into our project review reports on Codex. Apologize for going back and forth between my glasses. So if any of you are math geeks, you might notice that the number of species and communities we've mapped doesn't actually map our tracking list. So it's just a good point to remind you that our data EO forms are online, our tracking list is online, and we are boots on the ground out in the field. If you have an opportunity to collect that information and send it to us, we would love to get it into our database. So with that, I'm going to switch over to Julie Stolley. Julie is, as I said, the director of the Upper Colorado River Endangered Fish Recovery Program. And we've been working on a project with them for about 8 years now to develop a centralized database to track their endangered fish species locations, their pit tags, and their project activities. So are you out there, Julie?
I am here, Amy. Thanks for the introduction.
Thank you.
So yeah, Amy just asked me to come and talk a little about Streams, which is our online database. Our program works across multiple agencies, basically across the whole Upper Colorado and Green River systems. And part of our role in that is to compile information that's collected by a whole bunch of different people and figure out how we can use it to make management decisions. And Streams has really become sort of a foundational aspect in how we make decisions in our program. It started in long ago, before I got here, as a mechanism to track individual species as they move across the system. So we were looking at, for example, a razorback sucker that might have been stocked into the Green River, but then appeared in the Colorado a year later and a Gunnison the year after that. And the timing of a lot of those detections and being able to track all of these things shows us where these fish are spawning, how successful they are at reproducing in the system, and for razorback sucker, how survival is working for a whole bunch of stocked razorbacks that have moved into the system. Beyond that, in the last couple of years, we've really transitioned from looking at these individual fish that move throughout the system and using Streams as sort of the backbone of data analysis for the program as a whole. We have a new database coordinator online named Chris Michaud, who's got a ton of experience looking at these broader data sets. And it's really having Streams available to us and all of our data in a consistent location and consistent format allows us to see patterns across the system that we would not be otherwise able to see. So I can only say that I am excited about how the future will play out within our program to really be able to use this big data to manage the 4 endangered species in the Colorado River.
Thank you so much, Julie. Now I'll switch over to Erin Welch, the director of the State Division of Conservation. You out there, Erin?
Yes, thank you, Amy. And thank you for the invitation. Glad to be here today. I don't know what I regret more, not being there in person or being the only person standing between everyone there and a taco bar. But yeah, I have the distinct pleasure of working with Amy and Michael on Colorado's Registry of Conservation Easements. So to explain what that is, I'll back up a step and just give you a little bit of an overview of the Division of Conservation. What we do is we administer Colorado's state income tax credit program for donated conservation easements. Tax credit's been around now for more than 20 years. The Division of Conservation was just established in 2018, but that is now where the state's tax credit program is largely housed. So that means we do primarily 2 things. One, we certify organizations to hold donated conservation easements for the purposes of the tax credits. Those are mostly nonprofit land trusts and also local governments, county open space programs and whatnot. And then secondly, we review conservation easement transactions to ensure that they are quote unquote qualified conservation contributions that are supported by credible appraisals. So how do we do that? Really, the yardstick by which we assess conservation easements is comprised by criteria established by the Internal Revenue Code, Treasury regulations, and uniform standards for professional appraisal practice. Essentially, we're using tax policy as a tool for conservation. And all I'll say about that is that tax policy is a sometimes effective but imperfect tool for conservation. The conservation values component comprised by those criteria fall into four very broad categories. We have public recreation or education, relatively natural habitat, open space, including agriculture, and also historic preservation. And I don't have to tell anyone here that these are coarse-grained categories that kind of beg for refinement whenever someone asks what the state gets from the tax credit. And this is where COMAP comes in and the work of CNHP. So the division shares information or data with COMAP. And this came about relatively recently when Colorado lawmakers called for a registry of conservation easements. So in 2018, there was a piece of legislation that called for a registry and gave the division formal authority to share information that otherwise may have been considered confidential taxpayer information. And gave us the authority to share that with a third-party vendor. The following year, in 2019, another piece of legislation further clarified that CNHP would be that third-party vendor. So today, we're in a place where the Division of Conservation shares copies of recorded deeds of conservation easement in real time with COMAP. In effect, when we issue a tax credit certificate to a landowner who has donated a conservation easement, the moment we issue that, that data is shared with Amy and Michael and the folks at COMAP. So this provides for COMAP to be as complete as possible. I think, right now there's more than 675,000 acres spread across 55 of Colorado's 64 counties that have been, protected in perpetuity by conservation easements. So this leaves Amy and Michael with the fun task of adapting meets and bounds legal descriptions into shape files, which from where I sit is just plainly magic as far as I'm concerned. So in conclusion, COMAP provides the people of Colorado with a registry of conservation easements, and it equips CNHP, I think, with the data to refine those crude categories that I mentioned earlier. So with that, thanks very much, Amy. Thank you, Michael, and the rest of the CNHP team, and enjoy the taco bar.
Thank you so much, Aaron. We're going to switch over to Michael Menefee for some parting words.
Man, everyone's really waiting on that taco bar. Hope it's good after all that. I just have one slide, so I'm not going to keep you for long. It's really kind of a segue for our afternoon section after lunch when we can really look at Codex. But as a result of Codex, we've had some data request enhancements I want to make you aware of. Our non-sensitive data request that a lot of the consultants in our audience have used, the tier 2 request, really has gone away, and Codex has replaced it with a much, much better product. And so now, in addition to getting our sensitive species data, you get a myriad of data from other very important partners like Parks and Wildlife sensitive species data, but also a lot of other data sets like the national wetlands data that Joanna's team's been working so hard on, and COMAP, and on and on. And so we invite you all to start running project reports on Codex for those needs. And for spatial data requests, we're still going to handle those manually. This is very sensitive data. We like to get a data license, and it's a partnership building opportunity. And really, that's what Codex is all about too, is helping to foster this whole partnership that Dave was alluding to in his introduction that we seek to do with all of our partners. And when you do a spatial data request with us, one new enhancement is that for statewide data partners, you're going to get the view of that same data on Codex so that you get the partner level view of precise data on public lands, and then still more precise than the general public sees on private lands that's generalized 1 to 4 miles. So precise on public and slightly generalized on private, and we still provide a public display data set. But the advantage is now your workers don't have to buy an expensive GIS application. You can have your GIS analysts that want that whole geodatabase to do fancy things like Amy and I and others do, but most people probably just jump on the map and are going to be really happy. So with that, I'm going to save the rest of my thunder for after lunch. I know we're all hungry, and so let's dig in. And Dave, did you have any parting words for lunchtime instructions? All right. Well, and if you have any questions about data, please feel free to call me. We'd love to still get you spatial data. And if you haven't run a project report, hopefully after you see our after lunch, you'll want to.
Thank you, everybody. Just a quick word as they remove the barriers here on the wall. We are going to have lunch now. We're only 10 minutes behind. I think we'll just bump our program back 10 minutes. Our afternoon speaker, Vanessa Mazal, is on her way and having little challenges with traffic, so our delay might actually help a little bit. Please, while you're having lunch, if you're inspired to fill out these questions that we have on the tables, feel free to do so. And they can be posted back here on the board that Andrea is pointing out. And please go ahead and enjoy the taco bar till 1:15. We'll bump our agenda back a little ways here. And also towards the end of lunch, we're going to have a raffle and give away some goodies. You have some numbers in your name tags, so we'll use those numbers to give you fun stuff. And so please enjoy the taco bar. There's more seating here for you as well. If you're online with us, please come back at 1:15. You know what? I'm sorry. I was wrong about that. Let's say 1:10 because we're 10 minutes behind. And we'll do our codex update at 1:10. Okay. Thank you so much. Enjoy lunch.